In this podcast, we chat about the win against Sunderland and review Boro's transfer window. This is the Boro Breakdown Podcast, and this is like Boro Matchday Chatter in a pod.
Wants support. Curtis Fleming is there on the edge of the area. Fleming for Craig Hignett. Hit it, Higgy. Higgy hits the treble!
Avenelli coming alive again. Janino wants the ball played to him. Avenelli spots out Emerson!
Hello and welcome to the Boro Breakdown Podcast with Johnny, Dana and Tom. We are the Boro Podcast that gives you all of your Boro Matchday Chatter in a podcast. TEES, we are delighted for Boro on Monday night with a 1-0 win over Sunderland. A goal from Riley McGree in the 25th minute was enough to see off the Black Cats and move Boro up to 17th in the championship table. Guys, as always, I want to know how you're feeling, especially after the win against Sunderland. And you can do so in as many words as you want. Dana, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'm absolutely buzzing. But, I'm going to focus on 3 words in particular. I'm going to angle it a little bit differently this podcast. I'm going to say delighted for Dael, because Dael Fry has had a very insecure start to the season. I think his place has not been his place. But he stepped up to the plate in Daryl Lenihan's absence against Sunderland. And Chris Wilder's spoken a lot about Dael Fry allowing the centre forward to dictate the game to him. He did last season against Barnsley. Carlton Morris did it, and he mentioned it earlier on this season as well. There was none of that against Ellis Sims, who was a very dangerous player to play against as well. Very physical, also very quick off the mark as well. But he was fantastic. I can't remember the amount of times that I said, well done, Fry, in that second half against Sunderland. He was brilliant. And I'm delighted for him because, he's had a bit of a shaky start to the season. And that was just a very good, very, very good performance from Fry. And hopefully that's him confident now and ready to go for the next game.
So praise for Fry. Tom, what are you going to go for?
I'm just buzzing with it. I mean, as much as, Sunderland fans try to make out it's not a derby and stuff like that, I'd have been gutted if we lost to them. I think that match, the first half was the longest 45 minutes I've ever watched, I think. I mean, obviously we got the goal and it was like 25 or something like that. And then it felt like another hour went by until half time. Just because it was so kind of like end-to-end, I was like, I just really don't want them to equalise here. But, delighted we came away with the 3 points. I'm even more delighted that we kept a clean sheet, to be honest. I feel like we needed that at this stage of the season. It didn't look likely after like some of our performances in recent games. So just really happy to see us keep a clean sheet.
Okay, then. And for me, I'm just going to go a good result. I think it was a game of 2 halves in terms of performance-wise. I think, in that first half, I thought we were much more in control of the game. And the second half, for me, Sunderland dominated. But for me, it wasn't just a case of they dominated with the ball, but they didn't do too much with it. And Boro were quite safe in that front. But I think for me, the nerves were there because with Boro's form as of late, in terms of defence, it always brings the nerves back and you go, oh God, we could concede at any moment. And we'll shoot ourselves in the foot because we are our biggest enemies at this moment in time. So, but a big result, a really, really big result for us. And hopefully we can move up the table now and get a result against Blackpool as well. But let's chat about the game then, because Tony Mowbray's Sunderland, yes, I know Tony Mowbray's Sunderland, it doesn't sound right, I know. He came to town with them and, Ross Stewart got injured in the warm-up as well, which was a big, big loss for them. But Chris Wilder made one change to the side that lost against Watford with Dael Fry coming in for Daryl Lenihan, who is out injured. Tom, Dana's already alluded to it, but how do you think Dael Fry did on Monday night?
I thought he did really well. I think he deserves a lot of credit for it as well. As Dana mentioned, his start of the season has been a little bit insecure. And I think for me, to come in cold, really having not played, got subbed off twice at 45 minutes, it could affect a player's confidence, but he didn't look like that phased him at all. Obviously, he only had Ellis Sims to deal with. I say only, but that's, excluding Ross Stewart from the mix as well. But, Sims looked really good, looked really strong, quite quick as well. But we know what Fry can do. Kane and Ronaldo are still in his back pocket from last season, and I think it's only Lukaku we really struggled against. And Sims did put up a proper physical battle, and I think Fry did really well. I would say he won, probably around 3/4 of the headers against him, and kept him quiet really, which was fantastic to see. I think it was exactly what we needed. And yeah, I think it just kind of, he warrants a place in the team for Blackpool off that, I think.
Okay, so you think he warrants a place in the 11, but Dana, do you think that, although it's one game, would you prefer to see Fry in for Lenihan for Fry, or have both in Boro's defence in the future?
It's very orky corky, isn't it? You know what? I'd say Fry over.
Arms stretched.
I would say Fry for me. I've said it before. I think he's our best defender. Lenihan, I'm definitely warming to, but I mean, I think he had a protective boot, or the last time I saw that it was on his partner's Instagram story, so it seems like it's quite a significant injury. And I mean, I don't think we know much about it, to be honest, but I would probably put Fry in there anyway, because as I've said, I'll reiterate it, I feel like I broke a record. I feel like he is our best defender, and he's just needed a little bit of confidence, and that was the game that I think it brought the proper Dael Fry out that we saw last season. So I would say Fry in the middle, but then who plays on the right, because for me it's between McNair and Dijksteel rather than Dijksteel, McNair and Lenihan. So it's an interesting one, but we've got options, Dawn, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think for me on that right centre back role, Dijksteel wins it for me. I thought he made McNair look poor in that right centre back position on Monday night for me, and I think he has a lot of quality there, Dijksteel, and I know I really want to see him in centre defensive midfield, and I'm desperate to see at one point in his Boro career for him to play there. But yeah, for me, I think he's that right centre back position. For Fry and Lenihan, I think it's good to have that competition there for Fry. Fry needs a rocket in terms of getting like performances out of him, because if someone's constantly got his position, yes, he's not playing much, but he has to have that desire and trying to get himself back in that position and really prove his worth. And I think that hopefully has helped him do that and help kick on once again. But we'll soon see what Chris Wilder thinks. But in terms of like another position that we spoke about, we spoke a lot of in the summer, and it was a goalkeeping position. Lumley, well, underperformed to say the least last year. -1.4 prevented goals, a save rate of 69%. And hilariously, they're in the top 6, I think, at the moment, Reading. So in terms of everything else, so we brought in Stefan and Roberts, but after the last couple of games, Roberts has staked a claim, to say the least. Do you think he's going to probably pip Stefan to the post now, Tom?
I don't know, to be honest, because I feel like because Stefan's such a high-profile sign, and he's came from City, it's a World Cup year. I'm obviously we wouldn't know, but he could have like a clause in his contract where he plays if fit, which is the worry for me, because I think Roberts has done extremely well in the games where he has been called upon. We've seen success stories of goalkeepers coming up from lower leagues and making it in the Championship, and I feel like Roberts could be one of them. I don't want to kind of put too much pressure on him straight away, but he does look a lot more assured than we've maybe been used to, especially over the last season. But there were quite a lot of occasions on Monday night where a cross had come in, and under Lumley last season, we'd been terrified that someone's either getting their head on it or it's just going straight past him and in. But, Roberts was really authoritative in coming out and claiming them, loved a punch by the end of the game as well. And, yeah, I just think he didn't look out of place at all. So, if it is a battle between the two of them, and if there's nothing stopping him playing in the next few games, I don't see why he, potentially should be dropped. He's definitely in the conversation to keep that place in the team.
Dana?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I do agree with Tom. I feel like there will be some sort of clause in the loan deal with Stefan that enables him, or basically says to Boro, you have to play him if he's fit. But for me, I do feel like what I've seen of Robert so far, I trust him over Stefan. And I think Stefan's vulnerable from corners and deliveries into the box. We've seen that, but Roberts just felt safer to me. I didn't feel like I was at a nervous disposition watching him when he was called into action. And I said on BBC TEES after the game, I feel like that's the biggest compliment that you could give a goalkeeper. And I have been impressed with him so far over Stefan, and I don't feel like Stefan's name should propel him into the first team over a goalkeeper that's performing better than him. So we'll see when Stefan's back. It's, again, competition. It breeds a high level of performance, which is only good for Boro.
Yeah, it really is, and the say a good goalkeeper can save you about 10 points a season on average. And for me, he looked really solid. You could build a house on him, as I did, as I tweeted.
As I did.
As I did build, a detached house on Liam Roberts. But he looked really good. I think there's just a calming essence to him. And it looks like, for me, Boro have got a good goalkeeper on the hands. You don't be a League Two goalkeeper of the season if you're not good. And he's really impressed, not just me, but I think he impressed a lot of fans on Monday night. And yes, he hasn't had a lot to do in terms of saves over the last few games, but it doesn't matter. Dimmy didn't have a lot of saves back in the day, but he was a calming influence at the back. And I think, for me, he has the right to probably play that next game in net. But we'll soon see as the season goes on. The goalkeeping position is always under scrutiny, and one mistake and everyone forgets how good you are. So we'll soon see on that front. But let's speak about the game a little bit more, because I want us to dissect the performance of not just Boro but Sunderland as well. And then, overall assessment wise, how would you assess performance? Because I know we've kind of alluded to it at the start, tale of two halves pretty much for most of the game, but how would you assess things?
Well, I enjoyed the first half. I thought we were bang up for it. Our press was really good. The positioning of our players in that press was good because it was restricting them on the build out from the back. And it was particularly when Corey Evans and Daniel got on the ball. I noticed a lot of their passes were quite risky, playing across the face of midfield. And quite a few times you saw Rodrigo Muniz get a little bit of a toe end on it, but unfortunately not enough to fully intercept it. And I just thought we were good value for the goal. And then something that disappointed me that I actually noticed in the Swansea game as well, we sat back about 5 minutes after we scored. We just seemed to get deeper and deeper and invite pressure. And thankfully, for all Sunderland's decent play in the build-up, they didn't have that final ball. I mean, Jack Clark was passing to the ball boys 9 times out of 10. And I feel like that's something to keep an eye on. I don't know why we keep sitting back. Usually I'd attribute it to, a me and Minnow coming up against the Premier League side in the FA Cup, and they go 1-0 up, and then they simply have to sit back because they don't have the quality to match. But, in games, we should have the upper hand in terms of quality. So I'm not sure why we keep sitting back. Maybe it's an energy thing, but then again, 30 minutes into the game, surely we're not flagging there. But something to keep an eye on for sure. Second half, I think we had to dig in and we had to show our game management. There was a bit of naivety in the Watford game in that regard, but we were take the ball in the corner. Anthony Dijksteel was going down at the touch of a fairy and winding the Sunderland fans up, giving them a nice smile in all their fury, which was fantastic. And I think we have to do that sometimes. Obviously, it'd be good for us to win 4-5-0, but it doesn't happen a lot of the time. And I think we have to really dig our heels in and get the win, however we can do that. If that means take the ball in the corner, then so be it. And yeah, it was good to see the game out. Liam Roberts was loving it at the end when the full-time whistle went, because I think obviously celebrating the win and the clean sheet, which is really important, the first of the season, and hopefully that gives us the confidence now, the springboard to add to the win that we've got.
Yeah, I think just before we want the clean sheet, I think on the press on the why we sit back, I think it's to do with more of our forwards really. I think when you're a high pressing team, you can kind of move your back line up, but when you have like someone who's very like immobile, you tend to sit back and be a bit deeper. And I think it comes from that forward line press and see how we play games. And I think after that 30 minutes or in periods of games, we do tire because our press at times is very aggressive in key moments. And I think sometimes when Muniz gets tired, that's when we start to see teams get more into the game, become more influential. And I think that's why I thought I think it's why Chris Wilder brought on Duncan Watmore, but I also thought it was a really good sub because it pushed someone back a little bit more and it started to help us alleviate the pressure from constantly defending all the time. But I think that's something that we should probably look at over like the next few weeks and see how Boro have probably changed pressing styles this season. But Tom, clean sheet, how important was it, and how important was it to get a result as well?
I just thought it was really important to get that first clean sheet of the season. It's going to give us confidence that we can go into other games now and not concede, because some of the goals that we have conceded this season have been a bit daft. Like we could have kept so many more clean sheets and got more wins than we had done. Swansea game, prime example. I thought we never looked like conceding in that game, but it's all to help with confidence, and I think that'll definitely help us in the upcoming games, and just the win as well. If we want to kind of look at a very optimistic view, we've won 2 out of the last 3 now, so it's building. So
optimistic Tom, back at it again.
Back at it. Q was getting battered 3-0 away at Blackpool now, but
that's my job to curse us, Tom. The green curse, the official curse of Mills Football Club. I was going to say, I think Boro's result was it helped a little bit, Tom, with the loss of Stewart for Sunderland, because they had a lot of possession but just didn't create too much, and he tends to give them that bit of that focal point up front.
Yeah, I mean, I'd assume so. Ross Stewart is obviously a vital player for them. I think before the match, I was outside selling Flight with the Moon. I knew he was starting. Then I think it was about 15 minutes before I went into the stadium, my mate Scotty had texted us and he was like, Ross Stewart's not starting for him anymore. I was like, hey, what's happened here? Is it an injury in the warm-up? And yeah, I think I might have missed a sale because I was scrolling through Twitter on my phone trying to find out what happened. But obviously Mowbray said afterwards that they swap him out for Patrick Roberts and change the style of play. And I do think that really helped with Fry only having LS Sims to kind of really focus on there. I think if there was 2 of them, it would have been a different style of play, and maybe we would have had to kind of bring McNair and Clark into it a little bit more to cope with them. But as it was, with Roberts and Clark, and Clark, misplacing 9.5 out of 10 of his passes, it was, it was fairly, I don't want to say fairly comfortable, but it worked in our favour, I think.
Okay, with all of that in mind, then I think obviously they did have a lot of possession. They had to change system. They got more into the game. We've said that like the result was really important, and a clean sheet is again just as important. But in terms of performance wise, we've all alluded to this theme that's been tracking over like the last few games, and it seems that Boro are becoming like a one-half team where they play really well in the first half or a second half, but in the other half of it, we seem to just be a bit flat. We lose tempo. I think QPR is a fine example of that. Sunderland was a good example, and probably West Brom, where we started off really, really well and we let West Brom come into the game. What do you think? What do you think Boro have to do to become more consistent again, Dana?
Nothing. Honestly, I think the worst thing that we can do is change it, because you think about Boro's start to the season, I think one of the words to describe it would be unsettled. We have a very different team. We've got a new goalkeeper, 2 of our backline, fairly new Lenihan and our new Lenihan and Clark, new left wing back, new strikers, new midfielder and Alex Moore. Riley McGree wasn't a starter last season. It just needs time to gel. And I feel like time is probably the best remedy for this, I would say. Just hopefully Chris Wilder can find and land on his best 11, and then hopefully we can see the consistency go from there, because it has been very chop and change at the moment. Obviously, we've picked up a few injuries that are quite annoying. Stefan, Lenihan,
McNair.
Fry was ill, McNair, Johnny Howson went off against Watford. There's just Akpom as well, of course. There's just a lot of injuries that we keep picking up. If we can find a settled team, I feel like the consistency will start to find itself, and that we'll start to see a 2-half Boro rather than a 1-half Boro. But this was a problem last season as well, a very Jekyll and Hyde. I feel like Chris Wilder did sort it out to a certain degree, and it's come back again. But yeah, I think the worst thing that we could do is uproot things. I think that would probably be the worst thing to do in regards to that for me.
Okay, then. Tom, is there anything else that you want to add on that before we move on to the breakdown of the goal?
No, I mean, I just hope Dana's right with that, and that it needs time to gel. I've kind of leaned that way myself in thinking, but I think, as Dana mentioned there, it was a problem last season. I think we were even talking about this under Warnock. It was very kind of first half, second half performance. So, yeah, I'd hope it is just kind of needing time to gel. But hopefully, even if it's not that, hopefully Wilder and the coaching staff can work on it in some respect. But hopefully when everything clicks for this team, then we might see the end of that.
Okay, then. Well, let's break down this goal. Because another assist for Ryan Giles, the left foot that has came from Hogwarts. Dana, is there anything that you found as of interest in this goal?
Yes, I did. I mean, you talk there about Ryan Giles. It's fantastic delivery from him, but I just want to highlight the build-up play as well. Corey Evans, before Boro even start the attack, plays a really poor first-time ball, which Alex Mowatt pounces on, and then we recycle possession. We circulate it it's actually from right to left. Usually last season we saw it left to right because of Giles's influence on that right-hand side. But now, of course, you mentioned Giles there. We have him. He's such a threat from open play and from set pieces that you have to allow him to have possession of the ball. And if you look at when the ball is played from Clark to Giles, you can see that 09 retreats a few yards, which basically allows space for Riley McGree to take the touch. I feel like Luke 09 in that moment where he does retreat back from the defensive line, I feel like he's expecting that ball from Giles to be played in that corridor of uncertainty between the back line and the goalkeeper, so effectively being played behind him. But what happens is, of course, you see the delivery from Giles. It's played in front of Luke 09, and in that space, just on the edge of the 18-yard box where Riley McGree's made, I wouldn't even say a run, it's just a gentle jog past Dan Neal's. So what happens after that is that Luke 09 suddenly shifts his body position, but he can't really recover that because it's so right heavy that he can't get back to a centralized body way to be able to intercept that ball. Obviously, he does get a touch on the ball when Riley McGree has a shot, but I just feel like Luke 09 there feels like he anticipates the ball from Ryan Giles to be played in a different area to what it actually is. And by the way, that touch from Riley McGree is beautiful. I feel like it's gone under the radar a lot, but the ball from Giles actually bounces up right at the last minute, and that silky touch of Riley McGree's was always going to come in handy one day, and it did there because he basically takes two players out of the game in Danny Barr and Luke 09. Of course, I mentioned it there. He does get a touch on it, Luke 09, but it's Riley McGree that gets the final touch, crucially. But I really like that goal. I think the aggressive play there from Alex Mowatt to pounce and seize on that opportunity. It's not necessarily so much a counter-attack. It's not an incisive counter-attack. It's just Boro getting the ball back, recycling it, working it from one flank to the other, and then just letting Ryan Giles do his thing. That ball is absolutely brilliant from Ryan Giles to pick out Riley McGree there. Exactly. Just brilliant. I mean, I've run out of words to describe Ryan Giles. I can't believe that he's in the Championship. I can't believe Wolves haven't decided to take him on in their first team, because that left foot is something special.
Yeah, the theme. I think the theme song for Ryan Giles isn't she lovely? Really, by from Stevie Wonder, but isn't he lovely? Because it's you know.
Fully on
But
board with that. We need to make that into a song.
what, just like like edit something together with just like love
Shithouse
hearts
Island
next to
version.
Ryan
Yeah.
Giles. Ryan Giles Islands, or like with him outside of Hogwarts or something, because he's just magic. But no, he's brilliant, isn't he? He really is good. That left foot of it. Yeah, exactly, Tom. He's the best left winger for him. And to be honest, like it's just it's just the ball in is just it's wonderful. That entire goal is quality, and I think we'll see hopefully more of that in the coming weeks. But Tom, I'm gonna be and play devil and say, do you think you should have scored more, Riley McGree?
I think you should have got one more, yeah. Looking back on the chance, it was a lovely bit of play between him and Matt Crooks. Crooks pretty much backheeled it into his path, and he just hit it a little bit too close to the keeper. If he'd have got that a little bit further out towards the far post, or actually put his laces through it and got it off the ground, I think that was such a good opportunity to score. But I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think he actually had a little bit more time than he maybe thought as well. So he could have even took a touch there and placed it. But yeah, it could have been a very different game if he got that one. I think that was just towards the end of the second half. And then, first half. And then you go into second half 2-0 up. But at that point, it's, a lot more comfortable, completely different game. And, I'd have probably fancied us going to snatch a third at that point, because Sunderland would have had to overcommit chasing the game.
One final thing on Riley McGree then, because we see him score a goal. He ran over to the Sunderland fans, and we seen a lovely jump over his head from Rodrigo Muniz, which was also a delight.
NBA like that.
But
Human hurdle.
How high can Rodrigo Muniz hop over someone? Like we should at least try this out. But in terms of Riley McGree, then we put a tweet out and said, does he deserve to be on Shithouse Island? So guys, 66% said he did, but I want to hear your thoughts as well. Tom, does he deserve to be on the island?
Yeah, sure, why not? I mean, I love that. Just running straight over the Sunderland fans and doing that. Yeah, absolutely top quality shit. That was a so buying the tickets.
Dana?
Yeah, I would say so as well. I mean, it's the kind of shrug that he does as well, which is just fantastic. Yeah, he always had Shithouse Island potential, Riley McGree. So I'm absolutely delighted that he's in the conversation now.
Okay, well, it doesn't matter what I think, because everyone else is saying yes. So, Riley McGree, you are in Shithouse Island.
Shithouse Island drinks are free. Fun and sunshine, there's enough for everyone. All that's missing is the sea. But don't worry, you're a shit house.
Who would have thought George Michael and Wham would make a song about Shithouse Island? Tom, Dana and Tom, Paddy McNair going off injured. Nothing confirmed from the club so far in terms of the injury, but how would you assess the situation with Paddy and Dijksteel? Who fits the role better? Tom, do you want to quickly say yes or no?
Yes.
Yes or no to McNair or Dijksteel?
Personally, I prefer Dijksteel there. I think it's something I said.
I absolutely butchered that, didn't I, as well? I knew that.
I need to put myself on mute.
Pre-season, I prefer Dijksteel in that role personally, but from what Wilder was saying in the interviews and stuff pre-season, I fully expected Paddy McNair to be playing there. I thought Dijksteel did incredibly well when he came on, and like I say, I'd prefer to see him there, but I feel like if McNair's fit, he'll probably go back there.
No, I think it depends on what player you're looking for game to game, really, I think, because if you're looking for somebody that can break the lines through passing, probably offer a little bit more aerially, then Paddy McNair's your man. But if you want somebody that can, dribble out of defence and also combine a little bit better in those right-hand channels, then I think Dijksteel. But I don't think there's a lot between them, to be honest. I actually think that position should be celebrated a lot more than it is, because we've got two very, very good options there in Dijksteel and McNair. And I don't mind who plays, really. But my loyalties do lie with my favourite player, and that is Anthony Dijksteel. So I do have to say Anthony Dijksteel.
Okay, well, no, yes, I don't really know who's going to play there. But let's move on then and discuss the transfer window, because on last Thursday the transfer window slammed shut. 10 incomings, 13 outgoings, 17 if you want to count expired loans. But before we get to our thoughts, we spoke to Craig Johns from the Gazette to get an understanding of Boro's strategy this summer.
So we've reached the end of what has been a long, tiring, difficult and exhausting summer transfer window for Middlesbrough. It was a big squad overhaul. Chris Wilder felt that he needed that overhaul to almost reset the squad and get it looking more like he wanted it to look. He noted towards the end of last season, didn't he, had that, recruitment checklist that he had, and, he wanted to see many of those boxes being ticked that he sees as the hallmarks of a successful team. It's been such an interesting window. I think, you only need a look around the Championship to see not a lot of money being spent. I think there was a great stat where I think it was 40 million spent in the Championship roughly, and 20 million of that was from the teams in receipt of parachute payments, and of the rest of the money spent throughout the division, Boro spent 20% of that. So not a lot of money floating about in the Championship. Obviously the last couple of years with COVID, etc., really taking its toll, and even beyond that, I think it started to move eventually. But Chris Wilder spoke a lot about how difficult the market was and how the Premier League dictates a lot of what happens, because when they sign players, you get that domino effect of players then filtering down the divisions, and we didn't see an awful lot of that until much later in the window. It was an interesting summer in terms of the strategy at Middlesbrough. There's no doubt in that. It was another interesting balancing act. Chris Wilder is more in tune with the strategy now at Middlesbrough in terms of the type of signings that the club want to make. But he's also a very ambitious manager. I think we've all seen that in his time at the club. And part of that ambition is wanting that short-term success while appreciating the long-term vision of the club. And that's why it was such a big overhaul. And ideally, you wouldn't see that many signings made within one transfer window, because it makes it incredibly difficult. But there was that need to kind of strengthen for immediate impact, while also making the kind of development signings that we saw with the likes of Matthew Hoppe, Marcus Forss, etc. So a very interesting balancing act going on there that Boro had to manage. You just can't ignore that the club, despite bringing in the Jed Spence money and the Marcus Tavernier money, the club have lost 75+ million over the last 3 seasons. And obviously the new long-term vision is to become more sustainable. That ultimately means that if you recoup that money that they did from selling Spence and Tav, that doesn't wholly get reinvested into signings, because a lot of that money needs to go to just helping the club run day to day, essentially. They played a patient approach during the window. They did feel like better players would become available towards the end of the window. We saw that with Rodrigo Muniz. I think he's looked very impressive so far since coming in. To get him, they ultimately had to wait until Fulham were willing to let him come out. Matt Clark is another one. They were also trying for Jacob Greaves. We know that in that position. But, 2 players there who ultimately, they had to play the long game with Hull until Greaves eventually signed a new contract. And similarly with Brighton, they were uncertain what they were going to do with Matt Clark and wanted to assess him over the summer. And I think certainly, since those 2 players have come in, I think we've definitely seen Boro look more, more rounded, more balanced, particularly with Clark as the left-footed defender. I think that's really helped Boro, and obviously losing Akpom to injury, Muniz's presence in the last couple of games has certainly been telling. Within that, a little frustration that they didn't manage to do more quicker, but for good reason, because they felt that better quality players would become available. I think they got that right with Strand Larsen as well, though ultimately it still proved that the deal was too much for them to do, and Celta Vigo came in, provided a bigger pull for him than Boro, but were ultimately right in that FC Groningen would slightly lower the valuation and let him go in the end. They were right in that, and I've never had this firmed up, but I do feel like one of the other strikers that they were potentially believing would become available towards the end of the window would be Adam Armstrong. There was a lot of talk of him potentially going out on loan, but actually started the season quite well at Southampton, has played plenty of games, and obviously, you know, not available, didn't move on loan. So that's one where, you know, they felt patient approach might have benefited them, because I think everyone would appreciate that if Boro would have managed to bring in Adam Armstrong, that would have been a superb signing, but wasn't to be. By no means a perfect window. We can all see that they've ended the window short in certainly one position in midfield. You know, ultimately they've done a lot of positive work and strengthened a lot of the positions. I think they're stronger in goal than last season. I think they're stronger up front than last season. I think the players that they've brought in up front, if it might be a bit of a longer term thing, I think overall Muniz, Fours and Hoppy would fill me with more confidence than the three strikers that left at the end of last season. And defensively, while it hasn't been the best of starts to the season, I think once things start to settle, I think Darragh Lenihan's a really, really positive capture on a free transfer and has looked good so far. I think Matt Clark, once he builds his sharpness, he adds that balance as well that Wilder wants. I think he'll be a solid acquisition. And so I think they've strengthened there. And I think the obvious one, of course, is bringing Ryan Giles in at left wing back. I know he's only on loan, but, you know, we could all say last season the imbalance of how good Isaiah Jones was on the right, but how that wasn't complemented with anything on the left. And, you know, that's completely changed now this season with the introduction of Ryan Giles. So really positive work there. In terms of deadline day, and what really happened there was disappointing. We knew, you know, they wanted at least one. Wilder said he could have done with 3 on deadline day, and they ended up with none. I think, you know, there was a touch of bad luck really there for Middlesbrough. I think it's well known now that, you know, there was a deal done there with Brentford to bring in Frank Onyeka on loan. He would have been that kind of competitive midfielder that they need in there to kind of challenge Johnny House. And by all accounts from people I know at Brentford, he's a very, very good player as well. So yeah, that was all done. He was coming on loan, and then Christian Norgard gets the injury, and ultimately Brentford decide late on that they're going to have to pull the plug on that deal. And, you know, there's very little you can do on that, unfortunately. That's just bad luck. And who knows, Norgard, if his injury isn't too bad, could return before the January transfer window, and that could be, you know, potentially one to look at again in January. I do know that they were working hard. It's probably more beneficial to just be open with the fact that, you know, even as the day went on, I'd just sent Chris Wilder a message just to ask where things were. It was probably about 7, 8 o'clock on the night. Deadline, of course, at 11. It was a very fast response of still working, mate. That was all I got back, but it was so quick because he was clearly on his phone. And you know, speaking to people since then, Chris Wilder, Neil Bowser and Kieran Scott were all at Rockcliffe until beyond the 11 p.m. deadline, because they were all working hard to get something done, to try for anything. But Chris Wilder said they tried a few things, they explored a few avenues on the day, but nothing really came off for them, as he said it. And what is close, but certainly in terms of getting anyone up to Teesside, that never was a thing on deadline day. That wasn't something they managed. The only real link on the day, other than Onyeka, who we were always waiting on, was Fulham midfielder Josh Onomah. And while it was kind of more looking likely that he would go to West Brom, if anywhere, he ultimately didn't go anywhere either. So, yeah, a really quiet day. Not really the ideal day that Boro wanted, but so be it. It's left them needing to look at free agents now, which is something they are exploring. But yeah, I don't think that one disappointing day and that slight disappointment of not getting a midfielder in should take away from the fact that they also did all that positive work before that to bring in 10 players this summer. 6 permanent, which is really positive. I don't think that should be forgotten and shouldn't be understated just how positive and how difficult that was to do this summer. Credit to Boro for that. I think they do deserve that. Yeah, I think ultimately they have made progress within the squad. I think it, to me, looks a stronger and better balanced squad to go and have a decent season. It's not been a good start, but with a bit of settling and a bit of positive momentum, hopefully to be gained from that victory over Sunderland, I think we can start to see Boro's season really kick on now.
Thank you for that, Craig. Now, guys, I want to hear your opinions and assessments. Tom, how would you assess the window for Boro?
About 8 out of 10 for me. I think it was a really strong window. I think compared to last season, we've addressed a lot of key areas that we needed to bring in strength in, and I think the signings of like Lenihan, Giles, Stefan, Moet, Matt Clark, it's really addressed these areas well. The part I wasn't too keen on was selling Tav. I do think that made us weaker, and although Moet is a good player, and I think he's starting to hit his stride a little bit now. He definitely looked a bit more kind of creative against Sunderland than he had been in his first couple of matches. He's not kind of a like-for-like replacement for Tav. So that was the only bit I wasn't kind of keen on in terms of outgoings. And then we were a little bit short at the end of the window. Appreciate we're trying to address one position in the free agent market, it looks like. But, I think our transfer strategy this season has been much better than it has been in previous seasons. So, 8 out of 10 for me.
8 out of 10. Dana?
Yeah, I think it's been good. I'd probably say, maybe this is a bit harsh, but 6.8 to be precise. I don't feel like people should get bogged down on deadline day, because I know the grand occasion of it kind of makes it its own transfer window, that it almost, I don't know, it's different to what precedes it, but Boro have, in the grand scheme of the transfer window, made some really good signings. The left-hand side's been strengthened immensely with the signings of Ryan Giles and Matt Clark, as Tom's alluded to. And we have brought in some good value players like Darrell Lenihan on a free transfer. Hopefully the strikers can end up being much better value than they are, or that we brought them in for in maybe 18 months time or so. So yeah, I think it's been good. The reason why I put it as a 6.8 is just because of the massive red flags in midfield. It's if we do play with the 3-4-1-1, you've got number 10 there that doesn't have any depth beyond McGree. You've got Crooks' position, he picks up yellow cards like they're going out of fashion. That's going to be a problem. And then Howson's position, obviously, there's pretty much all of our midfield, bar the left, doesn't have any depth, and that's why I can't bump it up to a 7, because I just feel like there's a big concern in the middle of the park.
Did you say 3-4-1-1 there?
I was thinking that.
I was going to say 3-5-1-1. You mean
3-5-1-1? Yeah, 3-4-1-1. Yeah.
I was like, wait. I was like, can't. Well, obviously, with that, Dana, with the red flags that you mentioned, obviously depth is massive, a massive problem for Boro. Howson's only second defensive midfielder we've got at the club. Can we rely on him to get us through to January? And also, if not, is there a free agent out there that can come and help?
Well, there's a free agent that Boro seems to be quite keen on, and that's Massimo Luongo, who was at the game the other day, because I saw him and he was a mint man, but genuinely he was there at the game. And it seems as though he's on trial with us. He was training with Reading. I think Birmingham were keen as well, but he seems to be the one that Boro are taking quite an interest in. Whether or not we can rely on Howson, I feel like we can until January. I know obviously he went off against Watford with a hip problem, but Howson 9 times out of 10 is reliable. It's just that I'm sure it was Chris Wilder himself that said that he can't play week in, week out. Or Saturday, Tuesday, week in, week out. But, he did it for the majority of last season. I don't see why he can't do it until January. But it is a problem. It's a problem in his position. And I think it's actually Crooks' position that I'm probably most worried about, because Crooks does pick up a lot of yellow cards. You know, last season he got, what was it? Was it a 2-match ban for accumulating 10 yellow cards or whatever it was? He does pick up a lot of bookings. So, and he already has a few this season. So that's probably the main concern in midfield. But I feel like Johnny Howson, you could probably rely on him to get through to January. Whether or not we'll sign Luongo, it remains to be seen. But obviously, he's a player that Boro are keen on.
Yeah, speaking of Matt Crooks, sponsored by Clinton's Cards, he's our only right centre mid. Obviously, McNair can play there, of course. But do you think, Tom, it's more confusing that we've let Piero go now since we don't actually have any cover for it?
I wasn't a fan of the order in which we did it in the first place. It seemed to me during the window we were waiting on a lot of teams to bring in replacements before we were able to sign anyone. But we were very quick to kind of let Piero go without a replacement. We let Tav go and replaced him only, 2 or 3 weeks later. And that was like bang on the eve of the season as well. I think based on what Wilder has said about Piero, obviously we were at that night with Wilder like a month ago where he kind of briefly spoke about it, and there has been kind of
sorry, a night with Wilder. Just
I was internally laughing at that also.
You did. I bet you said a night with Wilder, did you?
I lost where I was now. He briefly spoke about it there, and then there's been things going around after that. It's been said on One Borough and a few other places that Piero's homesick and stuff like that. So it was probably in Piero's best interest to let him go back to Argentina and play football for arguably the biggest club in Argentina. So fair enough for letting him go. It's just, like I say, the order in which we did it, I wasn't too thrilled with, to be honest.
Well, here is a yes or no question. Can you see Piero being in a Boro shirt again, Dana?
No, to be honest. I mean, at that Q&A, Wilder was quite open about Piero and basically saying that it's a possibility that he could come back and could get into the team, but I just don't see it, especially because we've sent him on loan to a team in Argentina, which is where we bought him from. I just can't really see him after that being accustomed to English football, whether it's in the Championship or the Premier League. So for me, I don't feel like we'll see Piero in a Boro shirt again.
Tom?
I think we could under one scenario, and that would be Boca Juniors don't decide to buy him at the end of the loan. We go up, and then potentially he's more of a long-term project if we do that. But other than if that happens, I don't think so.
Okay, then. Well, let's talk about another departure as well, and it was a big one for Boro as well. £12.5 million for Max Tavernier going to Bournemouth. And then Parker got sacked, and they're still looking for a new manager.
Shock.
So it'll be intriguing to see what happens at Bournemouth. I think Sean Dyche is the favourite at the moment. So we'll soon see on that one. But why do you think Boro let him go, Tom? Because 12.5 million, it feels like he could have done one more year.
Well, I think he's probably been told one more year a couple of times now. And contract was running down. If we were going to cash in for 12.5 million, it was probably the ideal time to do it. Other than that, you wouldn't want to stand in the players' way. There's the attraction of playing Premier League football for a year, working under Scott Parker for a couple of weeks. What else could you want from a move to the Premier League? But no, I think genuinely, it is a chance for him to make that step up. If he believes in himself enough to play Premier League football and wanted the move and thought it was the best thing, then fair play. Just like I said earlier, it's I wasn't thrilled with the order of that one either. Really feel like we should have had someone lined up as soon as Tav left, because I don't think if we'd have said to Tav, we'll do it in a couple of weeks once we have someone lined up to replace you, I still don't think he would have like not like down tools or anything. You know, I think it showed in the Marseille game how much effort he was putting in. It was a pre-season friendly. I feel like he would have had the professional attitude to really give 100% for that couple of games until he could get that move.
Yeah, and I must say that he's looked really, really good in the Premier League so far, from what I've seen of him as well. So it's even more of a shame. But I think you were saying that Tom, his professionalism, what he kind of showed in at Boro was that legs in midfield, helped us get up the pitch, you know. And then did it really show now that he's left how much he brought to this side?
It did in the Watford game because we lacked athleticism in midfield. I think Tab obviously brings that dynamism, and between Moore and McGree, I think they could cover some basis of what Tav brings in possession, the creativity, the goal threat. But I don't think you can really replicate what he offered out of possession, which I do feel was underappreciated sometimes. We spoke in defense of him so many times and mentioned his energy, and it kind of got a few eye rolls on social media because, you know, what is energy? And you're seeing it now, how much it is a part of Chris Wilder's style of play. And I do think we have missed him in certain games, in certain moments, but listen, it is what it is. Apparently he wanted to take that opportunity. It's just, again, reiterate it, a massive shame it was Bournemouth out of all clubs. But yeah, we are going to miss Tav at certain points. It's always going to be a conversation of him not fully being replaced, but that's what happens when you move on your best player, unfortunately.
Yeah, and obviously Boro did get some good money for him. I mean, it could have been more. I think, a personal opinion, I wish we'd got a little bit more for Spence, not for Spence, for Tav.
For Spence as well. Like,
yeah, well, yeah, we could have got 50 million for Spence. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, why not?
Just give us all the money.
Just give us all the money. But to be fair, you know, 20 million for Spence, 12 million for Tav. You know, Boro got a lot of income in this window, especially. It's a lot in comparison to what we've had over the years. Anyway, I think that must be one of the most we've received in a transfer window since, I think, the first season we got relegated in 2016, 2017. Yeah, I think it was that one. That season was 17, 18.
Pulis was the one after when we sold all them
think
players and replaced them with Saville.
Yeah, that's it. That's the one. Yeah, but I think Craig Johns alluded to it and said that Boro, you know, they've been operating at quite a high debt over like the last couple of seasons, especially because of COVID as well. And do you think we can realistically see Boro spend any of the income we've got from the players in the January window, Dana?
I think so, but like we saw with Strand Larson and probably with Jacob Greaves as well, we're not going to pay over what we think are over the odds for players. I think long gone is spending 15 million on a striker. It's just not going to happen anymore. Boro trying to be more sustainable and being more smart and savvy with the money that they spend. And if that means spending it on a developmental player like Marcus Forth, for example, or Matthew Hoppe, then so be it. But in January, it's going to be an interesting market, isn't it? Because if Boro want that final piece of the jigsaw up front, the striker, very unrealistic to expect that to happen, to be honest. We saw how difficult it was last January. But I do feel like we'll spend. I do feel like we'll bring in a midfielder if we haven't brought one in on a free transfer. But just because, you know, and as Craig said, just because we've got that money in from Spence and Tav doesn't mean that all of it, or even the majority of it, is recouped in other transfer business. So I wouldn't expect Boro to spend big bucks, to be honest.
Tom?
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree with that. To be honest, I think it's. I really like the new kind of like smarter transfer strategy that we have. Not paying all of the odds, and you know, being a lot more what's the word for it, like frugal with the players that we're signing and getting some great deals. Matt Clark for 2 million is an absolutely outstanding deal. I think we're just going to end up spending money a lot smarter in that respect, and kind of like building up to, you know, we might see like a larger signing again in the future, for like, in my opinion, but I would feel like that would be about 5 years down the line if we're established in the Premier League, and then we're doing something similar to what Brentford are doing, letting players go for larger amounts and signing replacements for probably smaller amounts. But yeah, I really like what we're doing at the moment. I think in terms of like midfield depth, obviously we didn't address it, but that's another thing that I quite liked about the window. We obviously had our list of targets. And I think the striker position probably illustrates this better than midfield. But, we were priced out of Strand Larsen for like unrealistic figures from Groningen. Emil Rees, another unrealistic figure from Preston. And I feel like a few years ago, transfer deadline day would have been a day where we would be drawn to spending more money and dropping some bigger transfer fees on either of those two players or someone completely out of the blue. But for me, it looks like we exhausted our list of targets in about 3 positions, and we weren't going to be drawn on just kind of signing anyone. And I think moving forward now, we've obviously got a few months to really kind of scout those positions more, draw up some new lists ahead of January, and look to sign players who are more in the mould of what would fit for then. Rather than kind of panicking and spending 7 million on George Saville like we did a few years ago. So, I think it's a work in progress. Obviously, I think Johnny, you probably summed it up pre-season. I think it was where you said this is going to be like more a 2-year plan. I do think we're aiming best case scenario to get out of the league this season. But if we don't, then we've got another season to spend money wisely, fill in the positions we need to fill in, and build a more complete squad. I think we're kind of well on the way to that. I don't think next year's transfer window or even January is going to be anywhere near as big as the one we've just had. I think it's going to be a few players here and there and addressing the players that we need. But overall, I think our transfer strategies change for the better.
Yeah, I fully agree. I fully agree with the pair of you as well. And in terms of like Boro's strategy, that 3-year plan, that new Middlesbrough, the way of investing in players, not just for short term but long term, and trying to get profit on those is a really good way to go. And I think the way that we're trying to operate now is we're bringing in players that fits the style of Middlesbrough Football Club rather than the style that just fits Chris Wilder's style and how we want to operate in the future. And that in itself is a big bonus. And Boro fans won't see the benefit of that until maybe when Chris Wilder leaves the club, really. And obviously that could be he could go to Brighton in a couple of weeks with Potter going to Chelsea. He could actually go to Chelsea. You never know. Chris Wilder gets like every single job. Every single job.
I think it's out of order. He hasn't come out and ruled himself out of it yet.
Yeah. Exactly. It's bang out of order. But look, we'll see the benefit of that. We'll see the benefit of Boro's strategy, not just this year, but next year and in the year after that. And yeah, the signings themselves have been good. And we haven't seen the likes of Hoppy yet, and more of a force, but I feel like we will probably over the coming weeks. And we'll talk about the incomings now, because like I mentioned, there was 10. There was Liam Roberts, Lenihan, Giles, Stefan, Force, Hoppy, Smith, Mowat, Muniz, Matt Clark, around the fall of Boro's business. This could be a really easy question, and the answer might just be yes. But who has impressed you both so far? Who has been the most impressive player for you? Or most impressive deal? Dana, do you want to go first?
I think the most impressive deal is probably Matt Clark for 2.25 million or whatever it was. But I think the signing that's impressed me the most, it has to be Ryan Giles. Simple, really easy answer. Yeah. His left foot is brilliant. He's had an actual threat on that left hand side. So yeah, it's fairly simple, that one, Ryan Giles.
Tom?
Exactly the same. I think Ryan Giles, in terms of actual game time, has done the best out of the new signings. And Matt Clark, for me, if we'd had dropped out with the Jacob Greaves deal and then it come out the next week that we spent 5 million on Matt Clark, wouldn't have batted an eye about it. Like I just would have assumed, yeah, that fair enough. That's probably about what he's worth. To get him at 2.25 million, it's absolute steal. And it's like it was the guy. I think it was the guy off the West Brom podcast on our Matt
Louis
Clark
Van.
review show. Yeah, he said if we sell Clark on in a few years, he's going to be absolutely worth more than that, and I'd absolutely agree with that. I think he's worth more than that now, but again, just fits into our transfer strategy where we can upsell these players in a few years if we choose to, and then reinvest that money, on the path to being a lot more sustainable.
Yeah, I think that the two players that you've mentioned are definitely big highlights. We're seeing the benefit of Liam Roberts at the moment. Lenihan started relatively okay. I think there's improvement to be made there. And, we haven't seen the likes of Force much yet, or Hoppy, or, Smith. We haven't really seen much of it all. And there is going to be times where they're going to be used. And I think, we'll probably look back this window, maybe like January time, we'll go, actually, this was a really, really good summer for us. And hopefully we can see more goals come from Muniz and make him hopefully join the permanent, because I think he's class. And I just want to say he's the happiest striker I think I've ever seen in my life. He just plays with a constant smile on his face, and I'm absolutely here for it. But in terms of strikers, Tom, Force and Hoppy, 4-year deals for the pair of them, 23 and 21 respectively. And is this a case of Boro looking more long term, but more importantly, when do you think we'll see the best out of them?
I think it's absolutely Boro looking more long term. As I just mentioned with Matt Clark there, these will be on 4-year deals with the view of selling them on, I'm sure. Obviously, if they do really well, we won't want them to go. But, hopefully by a couple of years down the line, their value will have increased. I personally thought we'd have seen Force a little bit more by now, just because he came with quite talked up by some of the Brentford fans, and I thought we'd have probably seen a lot more than him, but it makes sense why we haven't in the current system. But I'd maybe say kind of within the next year for Force, and maybe within the next 2 for Hoppy. Maybe I haven't seen Hoppy too much to be able to kind of comment on that, but he's from all the noises around the club, and what we've read in kind of the articles from the Gazette and stuff, he has impressed during the training and the under 23s matches he's played. And Wilder said we might have a bit of a gem there. He also kind of alluded to the fact that Hoppy might be thrown in at some points this season, but he's going to have to adapt to the English game. So maybe take a year or 2 to do that, I think.
Okay, then. In terms of Boro creating chances and forwards, Dana, we were joint first for biggest chances created. We were 4th for expected goals, 7th for biggest chance misses. Biggest chance miss. Yeah, I did say that right. I was like, wait, as my dyslexia brain just went poof. But are you confident with the new strike force then? Do you think it'll help us fire up the table, even though we have missed those chances? We are underperforming on the goal side of things?
I wouldn't say confident. I'd say more hopeful, because we have brought in developmental strikers that I think they could just as easily be a complete failure as they could be a roaring success. It's up to themselves, it's up to the teammates, it's up to the coaching staff to make sure that they are a success rather than a failure. And I think the absence of what I've called a main man, maybe I'm getting too stuck to that, but I think it would have been just a little bit safer in the mind to know that you've got somebody that scored 10 plus goals or 15 odd goals in the Championship last season. That's not to say that Force or Hoppy or Muniz can't. And maybe this is a good thing. And we've spoken about this before, of unlocking talents before they've reached the level of being a 15 goal a season striker. Hopefully we can do that. I'm probably not confident in it, because let's be honest, this is Middlesbrough that we support. I don't think we should ever be confident about a striker being a success. But yeah, I'm hopeful. I like what Muniz has delivered so far, other than that shot against Watford at the halfway line. But he's physically imposing. I think he battled really hard against Sunderland without getting a goal. I thought his performance was good, and I don't think we've seen an awful lot of the others. Obviously, Force has scored. He's that poacher, isn't he? Hopefully, we can see a lot more of that. The key word is hope, and hopefully, because I wouldn't say confident.
Okay, well, let's Hoppy for the best then. in terms of best strike force, and penultimate question, of course, I've got one more for you. But what is Boro's best strike force this season or so far. Tom, what are you going to go for? Who is Boro's best strike force?
Well, I don't mind the current one with McGree playing behind Muniz. I think it serves a purpose and it's worked well while we have played it. What I'd quite like to see is Watmore playing alongside Muniz. I think that could potentially work well. Also, kind of like a third option, which I think might come into play a little bit further on the season, is Hoppy and Muniz. Just because Hoppy's left-footed, he might add a little bit more balance on that side. But yeah, I'd say McGree and Muniz at the moment. Like I say, it seems to be working well. I wouldn't want to change that.
Dinner.
See, I would say Muniz and Force, only because Force is a 6-yard box striker, isn't he? He'll get on the end of those crosses from Giles, but also I feel like he needs a physical presence to make the ball stick. And what we've seen from Muniz so far is that he can do that. I think he can get himself out of sticky situations where a defender's gotten tight to him, and he can shift it around, I think. And also I feel like he's a good finisher as well. The anticipation of the cross against Watford, that Bachmann wasn't getting to it. He was in the right place at the right time. I feel like they could work well off each other. Force would benefit from having that build-up striker that I think Muniz can be, and also he could be a decent finisher as well, hopefully. Again, that word. But yeah, I think Force and Muniz I'd like to see more of together.
Okay. I'm going to go with Muniz and Akpom. I just feel like it'd be a very, very difficult place for a defender, I think, for that 90 minutes, because I think just like the way that Akpom was playing before he got injured, he was bringing more people into play. Muniz, I think he is, he can be a fox in the box. Majority of his goals at Fulham prove that. So maybe you might have a bit of a problem in terms of press, but we'll get to that.
I think Muniz's press has been decent so far in terms of his positioning where he is. I mentioned earlier that he almost intercepted a lot of Sunderland's passes. He was just a little bit off on most of them, but potential there.
Yeah, I was probably more on about Akpom, but I mean, we'll see it. We'll probably see it. Who knows? But the final question then, and this comes back to our preview show, and it was a stick or twist question, because we gave our predictions, and I said I'll give you the chance once all the signings are done, if you want to stick or twist with your prediction in terms of Boro's finish in the table. So, Tom, you said 6th, Danny, you said 4th, and I said 5th. So playoffs. Tom, stick or twist?
Yeah, I want to stick with mine. I think
stick,
in terms of depth, we might see it through to January. I think the important thing to remember is we've got a 4-week break for the World Cup as well. So any kind of injuries or tiredness during that time might not have an effect come Christmas as they have in previous seasons. Wilder had said at the Q&A that they did have a plan for that 4 weeks, and we might have a few players hopefully not making too long a run in the World Cup, especially not Stefan, because they're in England's group. But they'll be coming back from the World Cup and kind of getting reintegrated. I think the next game after the World Cup's Luton at home, so it'd be good to start on with a win again there. So hopefully that won't have too much of an effect around winter time as we usually see. But I'm playing it safe, I think, okay, and sticking with 6th.
Okay. Dana, are you going to stick or twist?
I mean, when I said 4th, my mind was pinging from 4th and 5th, and I'm still pinging from 4th to 5th. I think because it's such an open championship this season, again, and I don't think there's necessarily a runaway team apart from maybe Sheffield United, I'm going to... I'm going to twist. I'm going to say down 1 to 5th, but still in the playoffs.
Okay. I'm going to stick with 5th. So, guys, thank you very much for joining me, as always. And to the listener and the viewers, thank you very much for watching us. But that's it. TEES, we delight, and the transfer window is shut. But are Boro finished in the market? After weighing up before you go, Massimo Luongo. But this has been the Boro Breakdown podcast, and that was all your Boro Match Day chatter in a pod. Up the Boro Breakdown.